The morning air in midtown Manhattan bit with a sharp November chill, the kind that sneaks under collars and nips at bare fingers. Gray clouds hung low, threatening rain that never quite fell, just lingered like a bad mood. Outside the sleek glass doors of the Grand Meridian Hotel, the usual rush of suits and tourists flowed, but on a slightly scuffed wooden bench tucked near a bus stop, a small figure sat perfectly still. She was wrapped in a puffy coat 2 sizes too big, its navy blue faded and patched at one elbow. Her name was Maya, though no one passing by knew it. To most, she was just another kid on the street, easy to overlook. Maya wasn't just sitting. She was watching. Her eyes, dark and alert, scanned the sidewalk like a hawk. In her lap, balanced carefully on a worn-out backpack, lay a sketchbook with a bent corner and a stubby pencil. She wasn't drawing the fancy cars or the tall buildings. She was sketching the people, the hurried businessman checking his watch, the woman struggling with too many shopping bags, the old man feeding pigeons crumbs from his pocket. She saw the little things others missed, the tired slump of shoulders, the quick glance of worry, the rare, genuine smile. She'd been coming to this spot for weeks. It was quiet enough to think, close enough to the public library where she did her homework after school, and far enough from the shelter where she and her grandmother stayed that she didn't feel smothered by its noise and rules. Her grandmother, Nana Rose, had been coughing more lately, a deep, rattling sound that scared Maya more than anything. The shelter doctor said it was just a bad cold, but Maya knew better. She'd seen that kind of cough before, back when her mom was still around. It never ended well. Her stomach growled, a familiar hollow ache. Breakfast had been a single granola bar shared with Nana Rose. Lunch would be whatever the school cafeteria offered, usually something mushy and unidentifiable. Dinner was a question mark. Sometimes, if she was lucky, the cafe across the street, the one with the big windows and the fancy chalkboard menu, would toss out unsold pastries near closing. She'd learned to time it just right, lingering near the alley door without looking like she was waiting. Dignity mattered even when you were hungry. That cafe was called the Daily Grind, though everything about it felt anything but ordinary. It served avocado toast that cost more than Maya's weekly allowance, smoothies in mason jars, and coffee brewed from beans flown in from some faraway mountain. The staff wore crisp aprons and moved with practiced ease. Maya watched them sometimes, especially the head chef, a tall man with a neat beard who always seemed to be shouting orders. Last night, though, something had been different. She'd been sitting right here, finishing her math homework under the weak glow of a street lamp, when she heard it, a wet, hacking cough coming from the cafe's service alley. Peeking around the corner, she saw the chef doubled over near a dumpster, his face pale under the flickering fluorescent light. He'd coughed so hard he dropped to one knee, and when he straightened up, he wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. In the dim light, Maya saw something dark smear his glove. It wasn't coffee. It looked thick, reddish. He'd looked around nervously, then hurried back inside, leaving the alley empty and silent except for the hum of the city. Maya hadn't slept much after that. She kept seeing that dark smear, hearing that awful cough. She knew what it could mean. At the shelter clinic, they'd talked about TB, tuberculosis, how it spread through the air when someone sick coughed or sneezed. How dangerous it was, especially for people who were already weak. She'd told Nana Rose, who just patted her hand and said, "Honey, don't borrow trouble." But Maya couldn't unsee it. Now, as the morning wore on, her sketchbook lay forgotten. Her eyes kept drifting back to the cafe's front door. She saw the chef inside, moving behind the counter, looking tired but functional. No mask, no sign he was sick. But Maya remembered the alley, the blood. Then a black SUV pulled up smoothly to the hotel entrance. A man stepped out. He wasn't flashy. Dark coat, simple scarf, no sunglasses despite the overcast sky. But there was something about the way he moved, the quiet confidence that made people subtly step aside. Maya recognized him from news clips her social studies teacher sometimes showed. Elias Thorne. The tech billionaire. The guy who built that huge company everyone used but no one really understood. He looked thinner than on TV, his face a little drawn like he hadn't been sleeping well. His assistant, a woman in a sharp gray suit, held a tablet and spoke quickly into a tiny earpiece. Elias walked toward the Daily Grind. Maya's heart started thumping. She saw him order at the counter, pointing to something on the menu. The chef, the same one from the alley, prepared his food with quick, efficient movements. A plate of avocado toast on thick sourdough, a small bowl of fruit, a ceramic mug of coffee. He handed it over with a polite nod. Elias took it, thanked him, and walked back toward the hotel bench, the one right next to Maya's. He sat down, unwrapped a linen napkin, and picked up his fork. He looked exhausted, like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. He took a bite of the toast, chewed slowly, staring blankly at the passing traffic. He looked like a man who hadn't tasted real food in a while, or maybe just hadn't enjoyed it. Maya's breath caught in her throat. The image of the chef coughing blood flashed in her mind. She thought of Nana Rose's weak cough. She thought of what the clinic nurse had said. TB spreads easy in close spaces. One good cough can do it. Without thinking, without planning, Maya shot to her feet. Her sketchbook tumbled to the ground, pages scattering. She didn't care. She took 3 quick steps toward the bench, her voice cracking with urgency as it cut through the city hum. "Don't let him eat that." The words hung in the air, sharp and sudden. Elias froze, fork halfway to his mouth. His assistant spun around, eyes wide, hand already moving toward her earpiece. 2 hotel security guards, who'd been leaning against the wall nearby, instantly straightened up, their hands resting near their belts. "Ma'am, step back," one guard said firmly, taking a step toward Maya, but Elias held up a hand. "Wait." His voice was calm, but his eyes were locked on Maya. He saw her, really saw her for the first time. Not just a kid on a bench, but a girl with wide, terrified eyes, her face pale under her wool hat, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. There was no anger in her voice, no demand for money, just raw, desperate fear. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice softer now. Maya swallowed hard, her throat dry. She could feel the guard's eyes on her, the assistant's suspicious glare. She wanted to run, to disappear back into the crowd. But she thought of that dark smear on the chef's glove. She thought of this man, sick-looking himself, eating food handled by someone who might be contagious. "The chef," she blurted out, her voice trembling but clear. "The one who made your food. He's sick. Really sick." She took a shaky breath. "I saw him last night. In the alley. He was coughing. And it wasn't just phlegm, it looked like blood." Silence fell over the little group. The assistant's hand dropped from her earpiece. The guards exchanged a glance. Elias slowly lowered his fork. He didn't look angry, he looked startled, concerned. He studied Maya's face, searching for any sign of a trick, a scam. But all he saw was honesty and a fear that felt too real to be fake. "Are you sure?" he asked quietly. Maya nodded, her chin wobbling. "I swear. I was right there." He wiped his mouth and his glove. It was red, dark red, like rust. She didn't know the medical terms, but she knew what blood looked like. Elias didn't hesitate. He pushed the plate away as if it had suddenly grown hot. "Call building security," he said to his assistant, his voice low but urgent. "And get the health department on the line, now." He turned back to Maya. "What's your name?" "Maya," she whispered. "Maya," he repeated as if memorizing it. "Thank you." The assistant was already barking orders into her earpiece, her tone sharp and professional. The guards moved closer, not to grab Maya, but to form a loose, protective circle around Elias. People on the sidewalk slowed down, curious, phones starting to come out. Maya felt exposed, vulnerable. She wanted to pick up her scattered drawings and vanish. But Elias did something unexpected. He stood up, walked over to where her sketchbook lay open on the pavement, and carefully gathered the loose pages. He handed them back to her, his fingers brushing hers for just a second. His hands were warm. "You're cold," he said, noticing her shivering. He didn't offer money. He didn't make a grand gesture. He just looked at her with eyes that held a strange kind of understanding, like he'd been lost too once. "Go somewhere warm, Maya, please." Then he turned and walked quickly back toward the hotel, his assistant trailing behind, already deep in a phone call. The guards lingered for a moment, then followed. Maya stood there, clutching her sketchbook to her chest, her heart still racing. The plate of avocado toast sat abandoned on the bench, the steam long gone. She watched as hotel staff in crisp uniforms came out, speaking in hushed, serious tones. Someone placed a "do not touch" sign over the plate. She didn't know who Elias Thorne really was, beyond the headlines. She didn't know if he'd believe her, or if he'd just think she was some crazy kid. But she'd said it. She'd warned him. That was all she could do. As she turned to walk toward the library, the wind picked up, tugging at her too big coat. She glanced back once. The cafe's front window was now crowded with staff, their faces tense. A city health inspector's car pulled up, lights flashing silently. Maya pulled her hat lower over her ears and kept walking, her stomach still empty, but her chest feeling strangely lighter. She'd spoken up. And for the first time in a long time, someone had actually listened. Elias didn't go back to his penthouse that morning. He sat in the quiet back room of the Grand Meridian's executive lounge, a steaming cup of herbal tea untouched in front of him. His mind wouldn't settle. The girl's voice kept echoing in his head, sharp, urgent, scared. Not for herself, but for him. That struck him more than anything. Most people who approached him on the street wanted something. A photo, a donation, a favor. But she'd only said, "Don't let him eat that." No ask, no pitch. Just warning. He'd been sick for months, not with anything dramatic, but a stubborn infection that had knocked his immune system down like a house of cards. His doctors warned him to be careful. No crowds, no undercooked food, no unnecessary risks. And yet he'd almost eaten a meal prepared by someone who might have been coughing up blood. The thought sent a chill through him that had nothing to do with the weather. Security confirmed it, his assistant said, stepping into the room quietly. She held a tablet, her expression serious. "We pulled footage from the cafe's rear camera, the one facing the alley. Timestamp matches last night around 10:45 p.m. She handed him the tablet. Elias watched the grainy black and white video. There was the chef, tall, bearded, wearing the same apron he'd had on this morning, staggering into the alley, clutching his side. He coughed violently, doubled over, then wiped his mouth with his glove. Even in low resolution, the dark smudge was visible. He looked exhausted, sick, maybe even ashamed. Then he straightened, glanced around like he was afraid someone saw him, and went back inside. Elias handed the tablet back, his jaw tight. "Call the Department of Health. Full inspection. Now." Within an hour, city health officials arrived at the daily grind. They didn't make a scene, no sirens, no flashing lights, but they moved with quiet authority. Staff were questioned. The chef was asked to step aside. By early afternoon, the cafe was closed temporarily for health compliance review. Rumors started swirling online. Food poisoning, a norovirus outbreak, even a celebrity scare. But the truth was quieter and more serious. Suspected active tuberculosis. Elias's personal physician arrived at the hotel suite by 2 p.m. He ran a quick risk assessment. "If it is TB," the doctor said carefully, "and if he was infectious and if you inhaled droplets while he was handling your food, there's a chance of exposure. We'll do a skin test tomorrow, but honestly, you got lucky. If you'd eaten more, or if you'd been standing closer when he was prepping it." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. That night, Elias couldn't sleep. Not because of fear, though that was there, but because of the girl. Maya. Where was she? Was she okay? Did she have somewhere warm to sleep? He remembered the way her coat hung off her shoulders, the careful way she held her sketchbook like it was precious. He remembered her eyes, wide, alert, full of a kind of street-smart wisdom that no kid her age should have to carry. He didn't want to send money. He didn't want to make a spectacle, but he couldn't just forget her. The next morning, he gave his assistant a new task. Find her. Gently. Don't scare her. Just find out if she's safe. It wasn't easy. Maya wasn't on social media. She didn't have a phone. But she had routines. She went to school. PS 118 on West 57th. She spent afternoons at the Midtown Public Library. She took the same bus route back to the shelter near 42nd Street. Within 2 days, his assistant had a quiet report. She's enrolled, doing well academically. Lives with her grandmother in a city-run transitional shelter. The grandmother has chronic bronchitis, possibly early-stage TB herself. She's on a waiting list for a specialist. Elias felt a knot tighten in his chest. So the girl wasn't just warning a stranger. She was living it. He didn't show up at the shelter. That would have been too much, too invasive. Instead, he went to the library, the same one Maya visited every day after school. He sat near the large windows overlooking the street, a book open in front of him that he wasn't really reading. He waited. At 3:45 p.m., she walked in. Same big coat, same backpack, same quiet focus. She nodded to the librarian at the front desk, clearly a regular, and headed straight for her usual spot in the history section, where the afternoon sun still reached. She pulled out her homework, then her sketchbook. Elias watched as she drew for a few minutes, her brow furrowed in concentration before switching to math problems. He waited until she took a break, stretching her arms and glancing out the window. Then he stood up, walked over slowly, and stopped a few feet away. "Maya," he said softly. She looked up, startled. Her eyes widened when she recognized him. For a second, she looked like she might bolt, but she didn't. She just sat very still, her pencil frozen midair. "It's okay," he said, keeping his voice low, hands visible at his sides. "I just wanted to thank you, properly." She studied him, her gaze sharp, cautious. "Are you sick?" she asked bluntly. "No," he said. "Not yet anyway. But I might have been, if you hadn't spoken up." The health department shut down the cafe. "The chef, he's getting help now. They think it might be TB." Maya nodded slowly. "I knew it," she whispered. "Nana's been coughing like that too." Elias crouched down slightly so he wasn't towering over her. "Is she getting care?" Maya looked down at her notebook, her fingers tracing the edge of a sketch. A drawing of an old woman sitting on a fire escape, wrapped in a blanket. "They say she's on a list, but the list is long." He didn't offer to fix it right then. He didn't say, "I'll pay for everything." That would have felt like pity, or worse, like he was buying her gratitude. Instead, he asked, "What do you like to draw?" She blinked, surprised by the question. "People," she said after a pause. "The ones nobody looks at." "I saw your drawings that day," he said. "The ones that fell. You're really good." A tiny flicker of pride crossed her face, then vanished. "It's just something to do." They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the library around them, pages turning, keyboards clicking, someone whispering on the phone. Elias didn't push. He just let the quiet settle. "Would it be okay," he finally said, "if I came by sometimes, just to check in? Not to give you stuff, just to talk, if you want." Maya looked at him for a long time. She wasn't used to adults keeping promises. Most had let her down, landlords, caseworkers, even family. But this man hadn't laughed at her. He hadn't called security on her. He'd listened. "Okay," she said quietly, "but not here." People stare. "Where then?" She thought for a second. "There's a park. Bryant Park, near the library. I go there on nice days." "I'll remember that," he said. He stood up slowly. "And Maya, thank you again. You did a brave thing." She didn't smile, but her shoulders relaxed just a little. "I just didn't want you to get sick." He walked away, leaving her with her homework and her sketches. But the next day, a quiet call was made. Through a trusted nonprofit that worked with housing and health access, an anonymous donation was processed, enough to fast-track Nana Rose's medical evaluation, cover copays, and secure a referral to a pulmonary specialist. No names were attached, just a case number. The shelter social worker was told only that a private donor had earmarked funds for urgent respiratory care for elderly residents. A week later, Nana Rose had her appointment. The diagnosis wasn't TB. It was severe bronchitis complicated by years of exposure to mold and cold, but it was treatable. With the right meds and a warmer, drier place to stay, she could recover. The social worker mentioned the mysterious donor to Maya, who just nodded, her eyes thoughtful. Meanwhile, Elias kept his word. He didn't show up every day, but once or twice a week around 4 p.m., he'd be sitting on a bench in Bryant Park reading a book or just watching the chess players. Sometimes Maya would walk by and nod. Sometimes she'd sit for 10 minutes and tell him about her art teacher, or how hard algebra was, or how Nana was sleeping better. He never interrupted. He never gave advice unless she asked. He just listened. One afternoon, she brought her sketchbook. Without saying a word, she flipped to a new page and started drawing him, his coat, his tired eyes, the way he held his coffee cup like it was the only thing anchoring him to the earth. "You don't have to draw me," he said. "A little embarrassed, I want to," she said simply. "You look like you carry a lot." He didn't argue. He sat still while she worked, the scratch of her pencil the only sound between them. When she was done, she tore out the page and handed it to him. He looked at it. It wasn't just a likeness. It was kind. It showed the weariness, yes, but also something else, something steady underneath, something human. "Thank you," he said, folding it carefully and tucking it into his coat pocket. "I'll keep this." News of the cafe incident had started to spread. not as gossip, but as a public health story. A local reporter dug into it, found out about the TB scare, and wrote a piece about how a keen-eyed bystander helped prevent a potential outbreak. The article didn't name Maya, Elias had made sure of that, but it quoted health officials praising community vigilance. Still, people started connecting dots. Someone recognized the description: a young black girl homeless seen near the hotel that morning. A blurry photo from a tourist's Instagram showed a girl shouting near the bench. It wasn't clear, but it was enough. Online, the story split. Some called her a hero. "This kid probably saved lives," one comment read. Others were skeptical. "Why was a billionaire trusting a street kid over a licensed chef?" asked another. A few voices turned ugly. "She's probably lying for attention." Or worse, racist remarks that made Elias's blood boil. He saw the comments. He didn't respond, but he made a quiet call to his legal team. Monitor any threats. Protect her identity. If anyone tries to approach her for interviews or photos, shut it down. He also visited the school principal, not as Elias Thorne, billionaire, but as a concerned community member. He asked about their arts program, their support for students in unstable housing. He didn't mention Maya by name, but he funded a new after-school art studio, complete with supplies, a part-time instructor, and a safe space for kids who needed somewhere to go after class. The principal, overwhelmed and grateful, had no idea who he really was, just that a generous donor cared. When Maya walked into the new art room the following Monday, her eyes lit up. Real canvases, tubes of paint, good pencils. She looked around like she'd stepped into a dream. That evening in the park, she told him about it. "It's amazing," she said, her voice soft with wonder. "I've never had real paints before, just crayons and whatever I could find." He smiled. "You deserve good tools." She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time without suspicion. "Why are you doing this?" He didn't give a grand speech. He just said, "Because someone should have done it for me when I was your age." She didn't ask what he meant. She just nodded like she understood more than he'd said. As the days passed, something shifted. Maya started standing a little taller. She laughed once, a real surprise laugh, when a pigeon stole a crumb from his hand in the park. She started talking about college, about wanting to be an artist or maybe a social worker. "So I can help kids like me," she said. "And Elias?" He started sleeping better. Not because his company's stock rose or a deal closed, but because he'd found something real in a world that often felt hollow. A connection. A purpose that didn't come with a price tag. He still didn't know how this would end. But for now, on a quiet bench in a city that never stopped moving, two people who'd been invisible to the world found each other, and that was enough. The weeks turned into months, and the quiet rhythm between them settled like snow on a city street, soft, steady, and real. He didn't show up every day, but often enough that Maya started looking for him when she walked through Bryant Park after school. Sometimes he'd be reading. Sometimes he'd just be sitting, watching the ice skaters in winter or the chess players arguing over moves. Other times he'd bring 2 hot chocolates from the kiosk, never making a big deal out of it, just setting one down beside her like it belonged there. She'd stopped flinching when he spoke. She even started asking questions. "What's it like?" she asked one afternoon, sketching the skyline. "To have so much money you don't know what to do with it?" He didn't laugh. He thought for a moment. "It's lonely," he said honestly. "People see the money, not you. They want things from you, not your time. And after a while you start wondering if anyone would even talk to you if you were broke." Maya nodded like she understood. "I know what it's like when people see you and look away," she said quietly. "Like you're invisible." They sat with that truth for a while, the wind rustling the bare branches above them. Things were getting better at home, too. Nana Rose was on medicine that actually worked. Her cough had quieted to a soft whisper, and color had returned to her cheeks. The shelter had moved them into a small transitional apartment, a single room with a kitchenette and a real bed. Not much, but it was theirs, and it was dry. Maya didn't have to worry about sharing a bathroom with 20 strangers anymore. She could do her homework at a table. She could leave her sketchbook out without fearing it would disappear. One day her art teacher pulled her aside after class. "There's a scholarship program," she said gently, "for students with talent and difficult circumstances. It covers tuition at a private school with a strong arts program. Full ride. They also provide supplies, mentorship, even summer workshops. Maya's heart jumped, then sank. I can't, she said quickly. Nana needs me, and I don't belong in places like that. Why not? The teacher asked. Maya didn't answer. But she knew why. Kids at those schools wore designer coats and talked about vacations in places she'd only seen in magazines. They wouldn't understand her. They'd stare, whisper, maybe even laugh. That evening in the park, she told him about the scholarship. She didn't ask for advice. She just needed to say it out loud. He listened, hands folded in his lap. When she finished, he didn't say, "You should go." He didn't say, "I'll pay for it." Instead, he asked, "What do you want?" She looked down at her boots, scuffed at the toes. "I want to draw. I want to learn. But I don't want to feel like I'm pretending to be someone I'm not." "You wouldn't be pretending," he said. "You'd just be Maya, the girl who sees people, the one who warned a stranger because it was the right thing to do. That's who you are, no matter where you sit in a classroom." She didn't answer right away, but the seed was planted. A few days later, the art teacher handed her an application. "Just fill it out," she said. "No promises, but you deserve a shot." Maya filled it out that night at the kitchen table. Nana rose, humming softly in the corner as she knitted. She wrote about her drawings, about watching people on the subway, about how art helped her make sense of a world that often felt too loud and too cold. She didn't mention being homeless. She didn't need to. It was in every line she drew, in every careful word she chose. She got in. The acceptance letter came on a Tuesday. She read it 3 times before she believed it. Full scholarship, starting next semester, art studio access, mentorship, even a locker with her name on it. She showed it to Nana Rose, who cried happy tears into her knitting. Then she walked straight to Bryant Park. He was there as usual. She didn't say anything at first, just handed him the letter. He read it slowly, his expression unreadable. Then he looked up, his eyes bright. "Maya," he said, voice thick, "you did this." "Not me, you. I couldn't have," she said. "Not without everything." He shook his head. "I just opened a door. You walked through it." Still, he helped quietly. He didn't pay the school, he didn't need to. But he made sure the scholarship office knew she'd need extra support. A winter coat that fit, a sturdy backpack, a tablet for digital art class. All arranged through the nonprofit, all anonymous. To the school, it looked like the program covered it. To Maya, it felt like someone believed in her enough to make sure she didn't stumble on the small things. Her first day at the new school was terrifying. She stood outside the tall brick building, clutching her new backpack, feeling like an imposter. Kids streamed past her in crisp uniforms, laughing, chatting about weekend plans. No one looked like her. No one dressed like her. She almost turned around. But then she remembered the alley, the chef coughing blood, the moment she'd spoken up even though her knees shook. If she could do that, she could walk through this door. Inside, it wasn't perfect. Some kids stared. A few whispered behind their hands. One boy in her art class asked, "Did you get in because you're poor?" She didn't cry. She just looked him in the eye and said, "I got in because I can draw better than you." He didn't say anything after that. Mostly, though, people were just normal. A girl named Chloe sat next to her in drawing class and asked if she wanted to share pencils. A teacher praised her shading technique. At lunch, she sat alone at first, but then Chloe waved her over. "You're the new artist, right? Show me how you do those eyes." Slowly, she started to belong, but outside school, the world wasn't so kind. Someone, maybe a tourist, maybe a local news blogger, had connected the dots. A post went viral. "Billionaire takes in homeless girl after she saves him from TB." There was no photo of her face, but the description was clear enough. Suddenly, her story was everywhere. Talk shows wanted interviews. Podcasters called the school. Strangers messaged her on social media. She didn't have an account, but kids at school showed her the posts. Some comments were sweet. "She's a hero. This gives me hope." But others were cruel. "She's just using him. Why does a billionaire care about one kid when there are thousands?" And then the worst ones, the ones laced with hate, mocking her skin, her situation, calling her a charity case or worse. At school, it got harder. Kids who'd been friendly started acting weird. "Is it true he's like your dad now?" one asked. "Do you live in his mansion?" Another said. My mom says you're only here because he feels guilty. Maya stopped eating lunch in the cafeteria. She'd hide in the art room, drawing furiously, trying to drown out the noise with the scratch of charcoal on paper. One afternoon, she didn't go to the park. She sat on a bench near the subway watching trains come and go, wondering if she should just quit. Go back to her old school, disappear. He found her there. He didn't say, "Why aren't you at the park?" He just sat down beside her, silent for a long time. "They think I'm pretending," she finally said, her voice small. "Like I'm not really smart or talented. Like I'm just—" His project, he didn't argue. He didn't say, "Ignore them." Instead, he told her something she didn't expect. "When I was your age," he said, "I lived in a trailer park." My dad left. My mom worked 3 jobs. Kids at school called me trailer trash, said I'd never amount to anything. He looked at his hands. "I used to skip school just to avoid the stares. I thought if I disappeared, maybe the shame would too." Maya turned to him, surprised. She'd never imagined him like that. Small, scared, unwanted. "What changed?" she asked. "I found something I was good at," he said. "Computers. And I held on to it like a lifeline. Not because I wanted to be rich, but because it reminded me I was more than what they said I was." He looked at her then, really looked at her. "You've got that too, Maya. Your art, your eyes, your courage. That's yours. No one can take it. And no one gets to define you. Not the kids at school, not the people online, not even me." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "It just hurts, I know," he said. "But you don't have to face it alone." That night, she went back to the art room. She didn't draw people on the street. She drew herself, standing tall, eyes forward, sketchbook in hand. Around her, she drew shadowy figures with speech bubbles full of cruel words, but they were fading, like smoke. In the corner, she wrote one word: "Seen." She showed it to him the next day. He didn't say much. Just nodded, his throat tight. "That's powerful," he said. "Really powerful." A local gallery owner happened to visit the school's art showcase that month. She saw Maya's piece, "Seen," and stopped dead in her tracks. She asked the teacher about the artist. When she heard the story, she didn't ask for a sob story. She just said, "I want to show this in my gallery with other young voices." Maya was stunned. "Me in a real gallery?" "Yes," the woman said. "Your work matters." The exhibit was called Unseen New York. It featured art from teens in shelters, foster care, immigrant families, kids the city often overlooked. Maya's piece hung right at the entrance. On opening night, she wore a simple black dress Nana Rose had found at a thrift store, cleaned and pressed until it shone. She stood beside her drawing, nervous but proud. People stopped. They read the title. They looked at her. Not with pity, not with suspicion, but with respect. He stood in the back near the door watching. He didn't approach her. He didn't need to. He saw the way her shoulders straightened when someone complimented her work. Saw the small smile when a little girl pointed to her drawing and said, "She looks brave." Later, as the crowd thinned, Maya walked over to him. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" he asked. "For not letting me disappear," he smiled. "You never could. You're too bright." And in that moment, surrounded by art and strangers who finally saw her, Maya didn't feel like a charity case. She didn't feel like an imposter. She felt like herself. Maya, the artist, the observer, the girl who spoke up when it mattered. And that was more than enough. The gallery opening should have been a high point, the kind of moment people look back on and say, "That's when everything changed." And for a few days, it felt that way. Maya walked through the school halls with her head a little higher. Teachers smiled at her differently, not with pity but with pride. Even the kids who'd whispered behind her back seemed quieter, like they weren't so sure anymore. But then the internet caught up. A video surfaced, not of the gallery, but of that first morning outside the hotel. Someone had dug up old security footage from a nearby store, edited it with dramatic music and bold text. "Homeless girl saves billionaire, now lives in luxury." It wasn't true. She still lived in the same small apartment with Nana Rose, still took the bus, still did her own laundry, but the story twisted in the telling. Comments poured in. Some called her lucky, others called her a pawn. And then came the ugliest voices. "Why her and not my kid? She's playing the race card. He's just using her for good PR." At school, it got worse. A group of students started a fake social media account pretending to be her, posting made-up quotes like, "I only go to this school because rich people feel bad for me." Someone printed out screenshots and taped them to the bathroom mirror. Maya found them during lunch and stood there, staring at her own name under words she'd never say, her stomach twisting like a wrung-out rag. She stopped going to the art room after school. She ate lunch in the library, hiding behind a stack of books. She didn't tell Nana Rose didn't want to worry her. And she didn't go to the park. Not for almost 2 weeks, he noticed right away. He waited on the bench every afternoon just in case. But she never came. He didn't chase her. He knew better than that. Instead, he called the school counselor, a woman he'd quietly supported through a donation to the mental health program, and asked if she'd check in on Maya. Gently, without mentioning him, the counselor did. She found Maya in the library one day, head down over a textbook, eyes red-rimmed. "Want to talk?" the counselor asked, sitting beside her. Maya shook her head. "Nothing's wrong." "You don't have to lie to me," the counselor said softly. "People are saying things, aren't they?" Maya's breath hitched. She didn't answer, but tears spilled over. "That was answer enough. They don't know you," the counselor said, "and they don't get to decide who you are." But it didn't feel that simple. At night, Maya lay awake, replaying every cruel comment, every sideways glance. She started wondering if maybe they were right. Maybe she didn't belong. Maybe she was just a story people used to feel something, hope, guilt, outrage, before moving on to the next headline. One rainy afternoon, she skipped the bus home and walked instead, hood pulled low, hands shoved deep in her pockets. She didn't know where she was going. She just needed to move, to outrun the noise in her head. She ended up near the old shelter, the one she and Nana Rose had left. It looked smaller now, grayer. A group of kids huddled under the awning, sharing a bag of chips. One of them looked about her age, thin jacket, no gloves. Their eyes met for a second. Maya saw herself in that look, tired, watchful, used to being unseen. She kept walking. She didn't realize he was following her until she turned down a quiet side street and heard footsteps behind her. She spun around, heart pounding. It was him. He stood a few feet away, holding an umbrella, rain dripping off the edges. He didn't look angry. "Just worried. I didn't mean to scare you," he said. "I saw you walking and I just wanted to make sure you were okay." She crossed her arms, defensive. "I'm fine." "You haven't been to the park," he said gently. "I don't want to be part of your charity show anymore," she blurted out, the words sharp with hurt. "Everyone thinks I'm your pet project. Like I'm only here because you felt sorry for me." He didn't flinch. He just nodded slowly. "I hear you. And I'm sorry it feels that way." "You don't get it," she said, voice cracking. "You can walk away from this anytime. Go back to your penthouse, your meetings, your life. But I'm stuck with it. Every day." He was quiet for a long moment. Rain pattered on the pavement between them. "You're right," he finally said. "I can walk away. But I don't want to. And not because I'm saving you. I stay because you remind me what matters. You see the world clearly, without filters, without pretending. That's rare. And it's not because you're poor or because I'm rich. It's because you pay attention." He stepped closer, just enough to share the umbrella. "And you're not stuck, Maya. You're building something. Your art, your voice, they're yours. No one can take that, no matter what they say online." She looked down, tears mixing with rain on her cheeks. "It just hurts so much." "I know," he said. "But you don't have to carry it alone." He didn't offer solutions. He didn't promise to fix it. He just stood there in the rain with her, silent until her breathing slowed. That night she went back to her sketchbook. Not to hide, but to fight. She started a new series. She called it Labels. One drawing showed a girl with homeless stamped across her forehead like a barcode. Another had charity case scribbled in graffiti behind her. A third showed the same girl tearing off the labels piece by piece, revealing her real face underneath, calm, strong, eyes full of quiet fire. She worked on it for days, pouring every hurt, every insult, every doubt onto the page, and with each stroke she felt lighter. She showed it to her art teacher, who gasped. "Maya, this is incredible." "I want to do something with it," Maya said. "Not just hang it. I want people to understand." Her teacher connected her with a youth advocacy group that ran workshops on media literacy and storytelling. They loved the series. "We're doing a citywide youth forum on representation," they told her. "Would you speak?" "Just 5 minutes. Share your story, show your art." Maya's stomach flipped. Public speaking? In front of strangers? But then she thought of the girl under the shelter awning, the one who looked like her. Maybe someone out there needed to hear that they weren't alone. She said yes. The night before the forum, she couldn't sleep. She practiced her speech in front of the mirror, voice shaking at first, then steadier. Nana Rose sat on the bed knitting, listening. "You're brave," she said softly. "Braver than I ever was." The next day, the community center was packed. Students, teachers, city officials, even a few reporters. Maya stood backstage, heart hammering. She clutched her sketchbook like a shield. Then her name was called. She walked out. The lights were bright. The room was quiet. She took a deep breath. "I used to think being seen was scary," she began, her voice quiet but clear. "Because when people saw me, they didn't see me. They saw homeless, they saw a problem. They saw a story they wanted to tell, not a person." She held up her first drawing, the one with the barcode. "This is what they put on me." Then the next. "This is what they called me." Then the last, the girl tearing off the labels. "This is who I really am." She didn't ask for pity. She didn't attack anyone. She just told the truth. How words hurt, how labels limit, how art helped her find her voice again. And how no one should have to prove they deserve to be treated like a human being. When she finished, the room was silent for a heartbeat. Then applause, real, warm, rising like a wave. Afterward, kids came up to her. "That was me too," one boy said. "They called me Trouble just because I moved schools a lot." A girl hugged her. "Thank you for saying it out loud." He was in the back, near the door again. He didn't come forward. He just watched her talk to the other kids, saw the way her shoulders relaxed, the way she smiled, really smiled for the first time in weeks. Later, as they walked to the bus stop together, she said, "I thought I wanted to disappear. But maybe I just needed to be heard." "You were," he said. "And you will be." She looked at him. "Why do you stay, really?" He thought for a moment. "Because the world tries to make people like you small. And you refuse to be. That's the kind of courage I want to be near." She didn't answer, but she walked a little taller the rest of the way. Back at school, things didn't magically fix themselves. But something had shifted. The fake account disappeared. The whispers faded, and when someone made a snide comment in the hallway, Chloe, the girl from art class, stepped in. "Shut up, you don't know her." Maya kept drawing. She started teaching a small workshop at the youth center, showing younger kids how to use art to tell their own stories. She even invited the girl from the shelter awning to come. The girl came the next week, shy at first, then grinning as she painted her first canvas. One afternoon in the park, she handed him a new sketch. It showed two figures on a bench, one older, one young, facing the city skyline. Between them, no words, just space. But the way they sat, shoulders almost touching, both looking forward, said everything. He looked at it for a long time. Then he folded it carefully and put it in his pocket right next to the first one she'd given him. "You know," he said, "you've changed more than just your own life." "How?" she asked. "You reminded a lot of us, myself included, that real change starts with seeing each other, not as problems or projects, just people." She smiled. "Guess I'm not so invisible after all." "No," he said. "You never were." A year had passed since that cold morning outside the hotel. The city hadn't changed much. Same honking cabs, same rush of people, same gray sky that sometimes broke into unexpected sun. But for Maya and the man who'd once been just a stranger on a bench, everything was different. Maya wasn't the girl who sat on the edge of the world anymore. She walked through school halls with her head up, not because she was special, but because she'd learned she didn't have to shrink to make others comfortable. Her art had grown bolder, her voice steadier. She still lived in the same small apartment with Nana Rose, who now breathed easier and even took walks in the park most mornings. They weren't rich, but they were safe. And that felt like a kind of wealth Maya hadn't known before. The man, Elias, had changed too. He still ran his company, still sat in boardrooms and made decisions that moved markets. But something in him had softened. He spent less time chasing the next big deal and more time listening, really listening to people who didn't usually get a seat at the table. And it all started with a girl who'd shouted a warning into the wind and refused to be ignored. One spring afternoon, they met not in the park, but in a quiet community center downtown. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, warming the wooden floors. Posters lined the walls, some with bold slogans like "Your Voice Matters," others with vibrant student artwork. In the center of the room, a small stage held a simple podium and two chairs. Maya stood near the back, adjusting the collar of her blazer, a gift from her art teacher for this occasion. She wasn't nervous this time. She was ready. Today was the launch of a new nonprofit, City Watch. Not a flashy name, but one with purpose. It focused on two things that had shaped Maya's life: youth homelessness and community health safety. The idea had come from her. What if kids like her who saw things adults missed could be part of the solution? What if they had a way to speak up without fear? Elias had listened. Then he'd acted. He didn't just fund it. He helped design it, with input from shelter workers, public health nurses, teachers, and most importantly, teens who'd lived it. The program trained young people to recognize health hazards in food service, housing, or public spaces, and gave them a safe, anonymous way to report concerns. It also provided emergency support, housing referrals, medical access, school advocacy for kids at risk of falling through the cracks. And Maya? She wasn't just a symbol. She was on the advisory board. At 15, she helped shape how the program reached kids, what language it used, where it showed up. If it feels like charity, she'd told the team during a planning meeting, they'll shut down. But if it feels like respect, they'll listen. Now, as guests filed in, city officials, nonprofit leaders, students from shelters and schools, Maya watched Elias take the stage. He didn't wear a suit, just a dark sweater and slacks like any regular person. He spoke simply, without jargon. "This isn't about one story," he said, his voice calm but firm. "It's about thousands of kids who see the world clearly but are never asked what they see. We built City Watch because safety shouldn't depend on luck, and dignity shouldn't be a privilege." Then he stepped aside and gestured to her. "This is Maya. She's not here because she was saved. She's here because she led." The room quieted as she walked to the podium. She didn't read from notes. She just spoke from her heart. "A year ago, I warned someone not to eat his food because I saw something wrong," she began. "I didn't do it for fame. I did it because it was the right thing. But after that, people acted like I was either a hero or a liar, like I couldn't just be a person." She paused, looking out at the faces, some familiar, some not. "City Watch isn't about heroes. It's about trust. It's about saying to kids, we see you, we hear you, and your eyes matter." She talked about the girl from the shelter who now ran her own art group, about the teen who reported mold in his building and got his family moved to safer housing, about how sometimes the smallest voice can stop the biggest problem, if someone's willing to listen. When she finished, the applause wasn't loud or showy. It was deep, real, the kind that comes from understanding. After the event, they walked together through the quiet streets, the way they used to. No bodyguards, no assistants, just two people who'd found each other in the noise. "You did good today," he said. "I had help," she replied, smiling. They stopped at a small diner, not fancy, just warm, with checkered tablecloths and the smell of coffee in the air. Nana Rose was already there, sitting in a booth by the window, her hands wrapped around a mug. She waved when she saw them. This was their ritual now. Once a month, a home-cooked meal. Not in a mansion, not in a five-star restaurant, but here, where the waitress knew their order and didn't stare. They sat down. Nana Rose reached across the table and squeezed Maya's hand. "Proud of you, baby," she whispered. The food came: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, simple, real, the kind of meal that fills more than your stomach. As they ate, they talked about small things. Maya's latest art project, Nana Rose's new knitting group, Elias's attempt to grow herbs on his balcony. They'd all died. No grand speeches, no drama, just the easy rhythm of people who'd earned each other's trust. Later, as they lingered over pie, Maya pulled out her sketchbook. She'd been working on something new. She flipped to a fresh page and began to draw. Not the city, not strangers, but him. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. The way he held his fork like he was thinking about something far away. The quiet strength in his posture even when he was tired. He noticed but didn't comment. He just sipped his coffee and let her work. When she was done, she tore out the page and slid it across the table. He looked at it. It wasn't perfect. The lines were rough in places. But it was honest. It showed the weight he carried, yes, but also the gentleness underneath. The man who'd listened when no one else would. "Thank you," he said, folding it carefully. "I'll keep this with the others," she nodded. Then quietly she said, "You know, I used to think rich people didn't care, and I used to think poor people didn't matter. But you showed me that's not true." He looked at her, his eyes soft. "You showed me that too, Maya. You didn't just save me from a meal. You reminded me what it means to be human." Outside, the city hummed on. Cars, sirens, laughter from a nearby playground. But inside the diner, for a little while, there was just this: warmth, food, and two people who'd crossed a divide no one thought could be bridged. In the weeks that followed, City Watch grew. Schools signed up. Health inspectors partnered with them. Teens started calling the hotline, not just to report dangers, but to ask for help. One call led to a family getting housing before they lost everything. Another stopped a foodborne illness outbreak at a community kitchen. Maya kept drawing. Her scene series traveled to other cities, shown in libraries and youth centers. She never called herself an activist. She just said, "I draw what I see." And Elias? He still sat on that bench in Bryant Park sometimes. But now when kids passed by, he didn't just watch. He smiled, he said hello. He remembered that every person has a story. And sometimes all it takes is one moment of courage. And one person willing to listen, to change everything. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyscrapers painting the sky in gold and pink, Maya sat on the bench with her sketchbook open. Elias sat beside her, quiet as always. She wasn't drawing the skyline this time. She was drawing the bench, the empty space beside her. The city stretching out ahead, because the story wasn't over. It was just beginning. And this time she knew she wouldn't be walking it alone.